Hi, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Doug Denny, the Director of Technical Marketing for our dedicated infrastructure business unit at Rackspace. And this is our Deep Dive Hangout. We host these Deep Dive Hangout sessions on the second, third, and fourth Wednesday of every month, and sometimes we throw in a bonus one too if we've got special topics we want to cover. But generally in each session, we like to talk about real-world topics often geared for practitioners that involve reference architectures or reports derivative of the work that we do for our customers at Rackspace. Today's format is a little bit different. We're actually having a higher level discussion geared for executives. We're not going to get into the weeds so much, but we're going to talk about broader themes that are impacting the way that we're seeing customers utilize cloud and dedicated single-tenant infrastructure together. If you're watching live, all three of you, if you have any questions, go ahead and use the Google Q&A app, and we'll let those stack up and get to your questions on the back half of the show. But more likely, you're watching on demand. And if you still have questions about the content in today's show, go ahead and email us at customercare@rackspace.com or tweet us at @Rackspace. And those messages will go to my team. We'll make sure we get those questions answered for you in a timely manner. So with that out of the way, I'll jump in and introduce today's guest, who I'm very excited to have with me. This is Sean Wiedage. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Doug. Good to be here.
Good. Thanks for being here. I didn't know if you're going to show up.
Of course.
Okay.
Anything for you.
What's your role here at Rackspace? What do you do?
Yeah, so you should know this because we've worked together for so long, but I'm guessing the audience doesn't.
Pretend like we haven't.
Okay, I'll pretend like we haven't. So I'm Sean Wiedage. I'm Vice President and CTO for our Enterprise Division. I spend my day in two different buckets. One side is I run our solution engineering and solution architecture teams, really helping our customers to land on the right solution across the broad Rackspace portfolio. It becomes much more challenging for customers to navigate our capabilities as our portfolio expands into more hybrid and cloud-enabled technologies. The second side of what I do is I spend a lot of time talking to customers about their needs, understanding how Rackspace's product needs to move forward, understanding where they're at in their cloud journey, and bringing those lessons back in so we can incorporate them into our product set.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here today.
Glad to be here.
So a couple things. We're going to talk about two main themes today. So the first is thinking hybrid, right? So and specifically Sean, has done a lot of work with our larger enterprise customers and has talked to them a lot about the transition toward and pragmatic adoption of cloud. And we'll unpack this here in a bit, but the summary is that we still encounter a lot of customers or prospects that view the world as very binary, my data center or the cloud. And we think there's a more pragmatic middle ground and trajectory to get from here to there that we want to unpack a little bit. And the second thing is that we're seeing a lot of customer trends where we're seeing customers that started in dedicated infrastructure with us years back, evolve to the cloud as their applications evolved. But then now we're seeing them actually step back into dedicated or private cloud infrastructure due to the economic benefits as their applications have matured and stabilized. And so we'll talk about the different factors that might lead someone to make that leap back to single tenant infrastructure from a multi-tenant cloud. So anything I missed?
No, sounds like great.
Okay, this should probably take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. And so this will be a shorter show than the typical deep technical shows that we do. But I think that's a good thing because we're going to speak at kind of higher level today.
That's my comfort zone.
Very good. Okay, so on the topic of thinking hybrid, so you actually recently presented at a Rackspace executive event. Was it in Mexico City?
I was down in Mexico, yeah. We had a great event. It was about 20 senior executives from companies in Mexico, and really talking about their cloud journey, where they were at. It was an incredible conversation. I learned a lot from listening to the topic, where each of these companies were in their evolution, and they learned a lot from terms of being able to network and have conversations with each other.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing I walked out of there having reinforced in my mind is that the cloud it's a journey to the cloud, particularly if you're a large enterprise IT organization. It is not a all or nothing type of approach. And so that was the biggest reminder for me, is that companies are at different places in their evolution towards a cloud enabled environments.
Okay. So yeah, people, while it sounds nice to just go from my data center to the cloud all in one fell swoop, That's not really happening in the real world, is it?
Not really happening in the real world. We framed the conversation. We had a little bit of fun because we framed the conversation as someone learning to swim, right? It's
right.
Your first step is kind of dipping your toes into the water. Your next step is learning to tread water and moving forward. And your final step is really being comfortable and potentially moving into competitive swimming.
Yeah.
And so those terms were able to help us focus the conversation on where people are in that journey. And what I found, at least in the group that was present there, is we had a group of individuals who were very much out and very self-sufficient, swimming by themselves, but they were heavily leveraging open source technologies, heavily leveraging private cloud stuff, right? So in terms of their comfort level with the cloud, they were very deep at using private cloud type infrastructures.
Okay.
The other end of the spectrum were the customers that were just kind of dipping their toes in the water. And these were interesting. They were taking a very measured type of an approach. And they were leveraging more of the public cloud infrastructure. So you would tend to think of it being the other way around, right? You tend to think of it as I'm going to start off with moving into a third-party data center, outsourced data center, private cloud, and then gradually make my way to public. It was a little bit different in this group. And so it reinforced to me that the journey to cloud is absolutely a journey. There are steps, but it also reinforced that every company has a little bit different path that they take to get there.
Yeah. This reminds me of, we were recently at EMC World together, and we get to participate in an outing with some folks. And we come from Rackspace, so we have this luxury in that a lot of forward-thinking type group pockets of companies might reach out to us. But at the same time, there's other pockets of the same companies that aren't quite so advanced.
Absolutely.
And it's always we always get sort of a stark reminder when we go out to these industry conferences where we're thinking cloud, but we sat down at a table and there were some folks at the table with us who were celebrating their move from Spark to x86, right? And so clearly, like, where are those guys out on the cloud journey? Well, they're not in Amazon, right? And so, but their problems are nonetheless completely valid. They should be celebrating that win. Right. But, not all workloads and things that you're tasked with owning in your business are even on the map for cloud. Right. And so helping customers think holistically about, okay, not just what do I have that's great for cloud, but like those apps that I might have that are great for cloud might still rely upon data that lives on Spark somewhere in a crusty old data center. Right. And so how am I going to get there? It's a long problem. And and I guess what I'm trying to express here is that it's not something that you can just go buy. Right? No, you can't just go buy a product that's going to get you from here to there. It's really a relationship where we start understanding how you work today, and iteratively over time through our relationship, start mapping out with you, the customer, the pieces you can move in a pragmatic, orderly way. Like, that's the only way to do it.
It's the only way to do it. I mean, you can try and dive into deep water. You tend to sink, right? So going back to the analogy we were using earlier. A very specific planned approach to what your strategy is, and the other thing is, I hear I'm talking to companies that are dipping their toes in, and they're saying, yeah, we're dipping our toes in, but you ask them, what's your plan? What happens after that? Is there a time frame around this? I heard a company the other day that said, yeah, we're looking at a 3-year plan to get to the cloud. And their version of cloud was very much private cloud, an iterative type of an approach.
Right.
That's too long, right? Your competitors are going to be out there. They're going to be out in front of you. Your end users, particularly in an enterprise IT type environment, your end users are going to do end arounds. They're going to be finding other vendors. They're going to be looking for third parties. They're going to be moving more quickly, which only builds the pressure on you. So companies need to be taking a very serious look at what the cloud can do, what that path looks like, and ultimately what the end model looks like. Right?
Yeah.
Some companies are aiming way out there and saying, I want to be all public cloud. I don't want to have any more data centers. Right. Other companies are taking a more the hybrid approach. There are certain assets, certain tools, certain systems that I will still need to have internally.
Yeah. But
there are other ones that I'm ready to start moving out right now.
Right.
And so everybody's got a little bit different path. I really enjoy sitting with customers and hearing kind of how they're thinking about things, how they're rationalizing their applications, what their strategies are, what their timelines are, and how we can help them to be able to build those out and deliver on those and make them successful. Yeah,
that makes sense. And we have of late been developing increasing tools in our arsenal that we can apply to this idea of this evolution of the customer, right? And so one of those that comes to mind, and which is also one of the supporting assets for the show today, is the Rack Connect Global white paper. And Rack Connect Global for us is a really important technology because what it does is it allows 2 real use cases, right? One is when a customer has their own on-premise data center, but they also decide to place infrastructure at Rackspace. again, we have these dependencies between applications where, they don't all exist in a vacuum. And Rack Connect Global allows this sort of data center extension use case of a customer's premise to ours, where we can logically extend the network from their facility to ours. And that paves the way for this pragmatic piece by piece replacement of workloads from their data center to ours.
It's a great enabling technology to give you a consistent experience. The other thing that I think is important to note there, and the reason that it's valuable, is our customers increasingly come into us and saying, hey, I'm traditionally a VMware shop. I'm looking at this Microsoft Azure stack that's coming down the path. I'm looking at Azure Public Cloud, AWS. I'm interested in OpenStack so I can get out of paying for some of the fees of hypervisors. Increasingly it's a multi-cloud world, right? And customers are coming in with different formats. Microsoft may have offered them some Azure as part of an enterprise agreement. They may have used a business unit, may have used a third party to bring in some AWS. And ultimately, the IT organization's going, I need to figure out how to support this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And not only in order to support it, I have to be able to efficiently connect and monitor and manage these systems. And so that's where our expertise around the management of the systems comes into play, but also these enabling technologies to allow you to be able to connect across platforms is really important, right? Low latency, secure type connectivity across these platforms.
Yeah, that makes, absolutely. And on top of that too, like when you first start a relationship with Rackspace, if you're an enterprise and you're an IT organization, chances are at the beginning of our relationship, the majority of your infrastructure is still going to live in your data center, right? So Rack Connect Global allows your data center to still be the heart of your overall enterprise infrastructure and allow most of the traffic, all of it, if needed, to flow through your existing perimeter security at your data center if you want to set it up that way. You don't have to have public internet connectivity to the infrastructure at Rackspace if your use case doesn't warrant it, right? And so that's the thing that like a lot of customers when I talk to at conferences don't realize is that you can have infrastructure in our data center, but not have it be on the internet, so to speak. You can still route through your managed network at your data center if that's what's the right thing to do. So so I like to bring that up a lot to folks who don't realize that we can use that. The other piece I want to talk about with respect to Rack Connect Global and what's in the white paper is this idea of, for people that are running workloads at Azure, you still might, this happens a lot. A customer says, I want to move this workload to the cloud, but they say the downside is all of my data lives on this NetApp. And it lives on a NetApp for a reason, which is like I've got data replication requirements that this NetApp or EMC array can meet that other cloud storage technologies can't. And so you've got this dilemma. It's like, man, this app would be great in the cloud, but I can't put a NetApp in the cloud. And so another use of Rack Connect Global is the idea that you can have single tenant physical infrastructure hosted at Rackspace, but have low latency connectivity over Equinix Cloud Exchange to your instances in the cloud, whether it be Amazon or Azure, right? So that you can actually start considering moving those workloads that previously were not on the table to move. And so that's another thing that we're seeing our customers sort of take us up on and deploy.
Yeah, absolutely. There are still times where nothing is a substitute for bare metal dedicated performance.
Right.
So presentation web tier being out in and allowing for that utility model, that burstability out in the public cloud, but you really want to come back and hit some of that large dedicated infrastructure, be it on the storage side, be it on the compute side. And so these technologies enable you to be able to bring those together as a hybrid capability, right? Low latency connectivity between points. The networks are moving faster and faster, becoming easier to provision, and they're allowing us to have more distributed type systems across geographies, and not requiring that everything be down in my data center in my building, right? And so the first step was taking pieces of my data center and moving them out to one facility or one provider. Now with Rack Connect Global and other extensions, you're able to take that and distribute it across where it makes the most sense for that infrastructure to live.
Very cool. Cool. Well, I think we've spent a good amount of minutes on that topic. Let's jump to the next one, which is the trends we're seeing amongst our customer base. Again, where we've got a lot of customers that have been with us a long time, and we have several cases we could talk about where our customers started life back in the old managed hosting days, developed an application, often like a SaaS company. This happens a lot with our older SaaS company customers, and then as we released a public cloud platform, they adopted it for all the reasons that one adopts public cloud. Largely technical capabilities, right, that come with the cloud delivery model. But as they've grown, as they've amassed a certain size, we've seen them start to migrate their way back towards a dedicated infrastructure. And the reason for that is very different, largely economic. So anything come to mind that you've seen with customers that have made that journey?
Yeah, I really enjoy working with our larger SaaS customers, particularly those that are catering to the Fortune 500 type of businesses. They're an interesting use case. They're in a very competitive market.
Mm-hmm.
They're moving very quickly, but yet they have to be able to deliver on the security, compliance, and regulatory expectations of a large enterprise.
Right.
And so they're always looking to push the envelope. And what we saw in these customers is we saw a transition. They went from being very much on a dedicated type platforms to trying to use the public cloud wherever they could, right?
Yeah.
They saw the impacts they could have around utility usage, around being able to scale up, scale down, faster iterations using things like DevOps tools. And so it was a great shift for them at that point in time. And then what we saw that they started hitting critical mass, and they started realizing that the public cloud, for all of its great benefits, isn't necessarily appropriate for every single workload that I have, right?
Yeah.
And they started looking at there are things that, as long as I'm not married to some of the tools that the public cloud provides, and I'm using things like third-party tools on top, open source tools, Chef, Puppet,
Mm-hmm.
automation tools, orchestration tools that aren't dependent on the infrastructure, those private cloud capabilities start looking much more attractive,
Right.
And depending on the technology stack. So coming back and looking at a Microsoft, the forthcoming Azure Stack platform in a private environment might make more sense for that customer if they're around Microsoft technologies. An open customer who's very much around open source and OpenStack as solution might give them better economics in terms of moving to a private cloud, but could also help them solve some challenges around bare metal type performance, high performance workloads that really require either high performance or very consistent performance.
Yeah.
Getting them out of the cloud can solve some of those challenges for them. So it's been interesting to watch that market segment go from dedicated into the cloud, and some of those are starting to make their way back into private clouds.
Yeah.
And they're usually a good precursor in terms of seeing what the big enterprises are doing. Flip side, what we're seeing from enterprises right now is enterprises are taking a little bit different approach, where they're on-prem into a private cloud environment and looking towards public cloud as the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
Some are going to make that final step. Some will still decide that private cloud gives them that right mix of performance, cost, and addresses the regulatory and compliance environments.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for those customers, I mean, they're really looking at, we've got the SaaS companies think about one workload, their app, right? That is their business. And IT thinks about diverse workloads across a wide range of businesses that they serve, right? And so the multi-cloud sort of makes a lot of sense, because IT has to optimize the cost for the workloads and can optimize those ultimately someday across multiple providers based on different criteria, policy, security, good old-fashioned budgets, right? And again, the SaaS company has a one workload that they have the luxury of being solely focused on, and they're going to optimize that, right, as best as they can, and they're going to evolve it over time. We had a customer actually on a previous deep dive that we referenced, where we talked about this same arc. So there's a whole deep dive focused on one customer story and the architecture that's evolved over time. And what they were finding too is while their application tier had grown increasingly sophisticated and distributed, they still had some features that relied upon standard relational database software, right? The nature of their data did and will always benefit from structured relational databases. And for that customer, bare metal databases made a ton of sense and will always make a ton of sense, but cloud made sense for everything else. But they're seeing an increasing amount of their data tier shift from cloud back into the dedicated world, right?
We're seeing that the data is really a big driver. Big data platforms,
yep.
High performance computing, data warehouses. Those are great solutions for private cloud solutions that can be provisioned with the similar speed to a public cloud, but give you that consistency of performance, that ability to customize the platform to meet the specific performance characteristics of that environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the second white paper that is attached to this discussion today goes into more detail around the conditions that lead people to look at either hybrid or single tenant private cloud solutions for infrastructure, right? What factors, and mostly the factors we talked about today, but again, you can take that offline and read through it. And if it generates any questions, again, please reach out to us at customercare@rackspace.com, and I'll get Sean on the phone and he'll answer all your questions.
Happy to do it.
While we're about on time, these are generally geared to be 20 to 30 minutes max. So any any parting thoughts, any things you really want the viewers to take away from the session today?
Yeah, so as parting thoughts, the transformation of the cloud is absolutely a journey, right? And the journey looks a little bit different depending upon your line of business, your compliance environment, the progressiveness of your audit teams. Rackspace has the people, via our professional services, our solution engineering, solution architecture team, to help you plot that path out. So by all means, feel free to engage us. If it's just a cursory question, if you want us to come in and have a much deeper conversation, we're happy and available to bring a taste of Fanatical support to you around that. And then in addition to having the expertise, we have the tools, right? The tools, the multiple platform support for multiple clouds, the enabling platforms such as Connect Global to be able to connect those so that we can use the best of breed technologies to be able to help you solve your business goals.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean, so much for your time. I really appreciate you showing up today.
Glad to be here.
Good. Folks, thanks again for your time as well. Please go to our rackspace.com/deep dive webpage. And from that page, you can check out the upcoming shows, as well as view the past library of shows and the assets that are attached to them if you want to check out some of the reference architectures and content from shows past. Do let us know if what we could do better, but also what we're doing well. And we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for coming.